Welcome back everyone to the beautiful world of React with WordPress. In the previous videos, we have learned about how to go ahead and log in the user and then also set up a dashboard for us. And we also learned about creating posts. And in this video, we're going to set up a context. So context will basically be using the React Context API, and we're going to set up a global store where we can store the data that we can reuse across all components. And I will tell you the reason why we would need that. So the problem is that if you click on posts and then if you click on one of these submenus, you can see it closes down, and ideally it shouldn't happen. Because even in WordPress, if you click on this and if you click on one of the submenus, this menu should stay open. What's happening is that if you're going onto this route, you can see that, notice that the route is changing. So if you were on the, let's say, route, and then you came on the add new, so your route changed. So because the state is maintained through the component, and the component is re-rendering every time you go to a different component using the route that we have, that's why it's getting reset back to the false state. So you can see that the submenu is currently false. So when you click on it, it goes true because we are setting the state into our component and asking it to go true. Okay, you can see that we are setting a state over here using the use effect, use state using React hooks, and we are setting the value of the reverse of whatever it was originally. Okay, but what happens is if you click on one of these, because the route changes and the component is re-rendered, we are setting the submenu active as false back again, because that's what the initial value of the submenu active is. That's false. So because the component is re-rendered, that's why the value is set back to false, which is not very healthy. So we should be able to make our state persistent across all of the components. That's the only way we'll be able to keep the menu as active, the submenu is active, right? So there are different ways to do it. First, we can go ahead and move our state from this component to our main component, which is app.js, and probably we just call lifting the state from a child component to its parent component. Now there will be multiple parent component, and this could get really complex because think about it. So we are currently into our main component, then we go down to our dashboard, and then to our submenus, and then menus, and so on and on and on. So it's going to be like you have to lift your state up to all the parent level to the main one, which means that if you define a state over here, you'll have to pass it to all of the children, which really doesn't solve the purpose. It makes things confusing. So the best way to do is if you can have a global persistent state that is going to be persistent to all of the components, we can just use them wherever we want to. So you might be thinking that, can we use Redux? Well, yes, you can. You certainly can use Redux, but the learning curve of the Redux is very, very high, because you have to spend time on learning it, and the concepts are pretty complex. It's not very easy to grasp. Yes, for those who already know about it, you can use it, but we are looking for something simple, and React has provided us with the Context API, which provides us with a global store that we can use across all of components. So whichever child component wants to grab some data out of it, they can grab it. So it's just one place, one store, which is going to keep all of your data that you need across the component. You don't have to actually put everything there, but just put things that you really need on all components. So something like this we need in all components, so we're going to keep that there. We would also need the token. So currently we are storing that into the local storage, and we will continue to store into local storage because local storage don't expire. So in case if he comes back later on, so for example, if I close my browser, if I come back again, you can see I'm still logged in, and probably this is what you would want your user to have. You don't want them to keep on logging over and over again if they close the browser accidentally. So that's why we are storing it in local storage. We will continue to do that, but rather than pulling that data, which is probably token or the username, for our future requests from the local storage, we can probably put that in context API and just pull it off the context API. So at the time the user logs in, you put that in the context API, and when he logs out, we can just remove that from the context API as well as from the local storage. So that way it can be persistent even if the browser is closed. So we're going to talk about all of that. It's going to be super fun, super simple as well. And let's go ahead and start building it. Okay, perfect. So the first thing we're going to do is create a directory called context. And what we're also going to do is, as we proceed along, we're going to convert all of our class components into the functional based components. Now you must be wondering, why did we not do that in the first place? Well, that was just to show you that it is possible to do it with classes, and you can still use your context API with classes as well. But I'm going to show you that if you use functional components, basically using hooks, then using context become really easy and really simple. So we're going to convert our class-based component into functional components, and from now on we're going to only use the functional based component because they make things very simple for you. And that's why the hooks came into picture, and with the help of the use state and use effect and use context, our life becomes simpler and simpler. Okay, so this is going to be a big application that we're building, so it's important that we think about simplicity, breaking down different things into smaller components. We're going to keep everything simple. Okay, awesome. Now, in order for us to create a context, if you go to context, React context. So if you go to reactjs.org, you'll be able to see how easy it is to create context. You can see all you have to do is just use react.createContext to create context and just put a default value. So let's do that. So inside of a context directory, we're going to create a file called app.context.js. Okay, and as you can clearly see that this is super simple. Just copy paste this for now. Of course, we would need to import React. So we can just say import React, and rather than saying react.createContext, I can just pull the create context from React over here. It's from React. Okay, and it needs a default value, so this is not going to be used. This is just to set like a kind of a structure of how our data would look like into our store. So what I really want to do is I want to have an object, and then I want to have a function. Okay, and this is going to be an array. Okay, so array, I want to have an object, and then I also want to have a function. So I'm just putting an empty arrow function. Okay, just a definition of it, just a declaration of it. Okay, so that's all. That's how you create the context, and let's name it as app context for our application, and just say export default app context. Brilliant, awesome. Okay, that's all you have to do. It's super simple. And then when you create the context, you need to have a provider that would pass in all of the data from the context into your components. So you need to wrap your components, all of your components, with that app provider. So you can see that you can create the context, and then you have the provider. So you need to pass the value. So whatever the value is, you need to pass it inside of the provider, and just wrap all of your component inside of the provider. So let's create one. I mean, we can do this as well into our app.js and just wrap all of this, like put like app.app context and like this context dot and so on, and then just wrap it. Like, I'm not writing all of that, you understand what I'm saying, just put it inside all of that. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to tell you the simpler way. Okay, so So coming back, so inside of a context, let's create another component and we call it app provider because you want to keep everything clean. Provider.js, because what happens is when you start working on a large application and if you have your code jumbled up and big, it becomes difficult to debug. So that's why it's better to go ahead and break things down, and you will see how simple it becomes when you do that. The first thing we do is just import React, and we're going to need we're going to pull everything that we need later on from, so import React from React. Okay, and then we just need to create a provider, so we'll call it app provider, and then we're going to need props. Okay, and then we'll say, so we're going to use the use state, so we'll create a default state set store, so initialize the state, and this will be a function which will be setting the value of the store, and then we say use state. Of course we'll need to pull that in from React. So we're going to need the use state and use effect, so let's just pull it, use state, use effect. If you don't know about hooks, guys, there's a tutorial series that I have on hooks. You can check out the playlist. You go to my channel and check out the playlist, and then you can learn about hooks from there. Okay, they're very, very user friendly. Okay, so in the initial state, what we're going to need is the username, because we might need to display that on the dashboard, who the user is. So we set username, initial value to empty. We need the token that we're going to use because when we're sending the private requests, we need to send the token in the header, so we can always pull that from the store. So think of this like a global store. Okay, and then we also want to have an active menu. We want to know which menu is active. So these are your menus, so we're going to set a value over here. Depending on whichever is active, we're going to set the value of this using set store function. And then we also need to know about this sidebar active, because you must have observed that we have to pass in the value of the active sidebar, which is this section right here. When you click on this, quite often to multiple children component, that's not very useful. Okay, because it makes things complex. Okay, and then let's just set the value of the token and the username by taking that information from the local storage, because if we don't do that, if we just set this store at the time of the login and not take that information in the local storage, then when the user closes the browser, that data won't be available, because every time you are rendering your initial component, then the default value of the token and the username will be blank, so user won't be logged in. So in order for this to be persistent, you just need to, whenever your app is initialized for the first time, you need to go ahead and grab that value from the local storage and just put that there. So we have use effect. So think of this as a component did mount. It's like a combination of many lifecycle methods that you can use. Okay, we put an empty array so that it doesn't go into infinite loop. And then inside of use effect, we're just going to say const, and then we're going to create token. I'm going to pull that token from, not create token, but just pull that token from the local storage. So if you remember, we have the local storage inside of token. So if you check, we have it inside of token, so we're just pulling that information from there. And then we also need the username. So we can pull that from username. Okay, just align it properly. Okay, great. And then we're going to call the set store, and what we're going to do is basically first spread the value of the store. So all of the data that we see over here, we're going to spread that so that when we are setting the store, we shouldn't lose any of the values that are already set. Okay, so by using the spread operator, it's just going to spread the whole thing over here. So think of this like this, you know. So think of this as like putting this is equivalent to this. So we're just putting all of these values here. Spread operator is just going to take all of the value and spread it over here, whatever the value of these are. Okay, so and then whatever we put next is going to change that value. So what we want to change out of these is going to be for token, and token will be equal to token. So in ES6, you know that if the property name and the property value is the same, we can just use 1 like this. This is equivalent to the same thing. Okay, and then we need to set the username. So again, instead of writing username equal to username, we can just put username, the same thing. Awesome. So we will set the store, and then we just need to do return. So you can see that in the context API, we have to use context.provider. So our context is app context, right? So it's pulled that app context that we've just exported from here, and then it's going to say app context.provider. That's what we need to do. And then we need to pass the value inside of it. So value is equal to something. I'm going to put that in a moment. And inside of this, we'll put props.children. So you can think of this as like a kind of a layout component, like a higher order component. So when you wrap all of your components inside of the app provider, then it's just going to fill in all of the children inside of it. Okay, so the value is going to be the array that we have, which is store and set store. So we're just going to put that here. Okay, and then just export this provider. So app export default app provider, and then we're just going to go to our main component, which is app.js, and then just wrap everything inside of the app provider that we've created. Okay, there you go. There you go. And just put that in. So what will happen is basically treat this as kind of a higher order component. So we are just returning the app context provider, passing the value inside of it, and props.children will be equivalent to this. So just going to fill in all of this inside of it. Okay, so that's how it's going to be rendered. So when it gets rendered, then it comes over here. Think about this one. It comes over here. This is going to be rendered. It's going to take the value, whatever children are there. In our case, these children, basically, whatever children are going to be there, it's going to pass that value, which we have just provided, to each of these components. So all of these components will have access to our global store, which is this. So it's going to have the initial state, all of this data, and it's going to have a set store as well function, which is going to go ahead and set the value of these, basically update the value of these properties, right? So initially we are setting the store to whatever it was before, which was default, and then the new token value from the local storage, and the username as well from the local storage, okay, which is this one right here. Okay, now since we've done that, you'll be able to see how simple it is to use it. So what I'm going to do is just go to any of a component. So let's say that which one do we have as a functional based component, because it's important to understand that if you're using use context, then you need to use a functional component. It won't work in the class components. To be able to use it in class component, and you'll have to probably use some other syntax. So where do we have? This is class based. Yep, this is functional base, so we can use it here. So now what we can do is we can just say const, and what are we passing? We are passing these two values, which is store and set store. So we're just going to pull that information from the context. So you can use context, and then inside of this you're just going to pass the app context that we've created, which is this one. Okay, and just pull that from React. So yeah, stay it's context, and if you just console its value, so let's say I want to see what's there in the store. So like I said, any of the component will have access to store, so ideally I should be able to use the store here. So let's check, and there you go. You can see this is a store. You have the username, which we set. You have the token, sidebar active is true. Sidebar active is true because that's what we set initially. User, and the active menu is just an empty object currently. So you can see you can access it here, you can access it wherever you want. So you can access it into any of the components. Your life becomes super simple because you want this data, go and grab it. You want to set that data, you want to change that data, no problem. Use the set store function, update the data. Okay. So in the next video, we're going to talk about how to update the data and how we're going to convert all of our components to functional component and use context to make changes to the global store, and how we can use it to our advantage. Okay, so I hope you did like the video, guys. If you did like it, please give a thumbs up to my video, and do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Please show your support by going and following me over here. So you should see a follow button somewhere here. Okay, and then also give a star to my repository. I have 9 people already started, so thank you everyone who have given a star to my repository, and do add a star over here, and also do follow me on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is Imran8Syed. Okay, and that is brilliant. So in the next video we're going to talk more about it. It's going to be super fun, and we're going to build the whole application in React together. Alright then, see you guys, take care, bye bye.